Kyagulanyi Ssentamu Robert Bobi Wine olunaku olwaleero asisinkanya abayizi ku University ya Howard University e Washington DC era nga ensonga ezoogerwako wakati mu baprofesa, wakati mu bamanyi, wakati mu basomesa, wakati mu bannabyabufuzi, wakati mu bakulembeze ab'enjawulo za kuggyako Nakyembalira General Kaguta Museveni dictator era ng'ebigambo biri bwe biti.
So much nasty things happened to her, but among which she told us that they even removed her contraception, the IUD, from her. Now these and many other abuses are done, especially to women. Knowing that was the case, I knew what would befall me if I fell in their hands. That's how I ended up here. Now many people, especially back home, especially those that are in support of the regime but are trading under the Pan-African banner, who are criticizing me of ending up in America and not in another African country like Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and all these others. But we all know that the dictatorships back home are intertwined and look up to one another. We have a very known political icon called Dr. Bakagezi, who was the main opposition leader for so many years before I showed up. He was abducted in Kenya by Ugandan security, driven across the border in a car truck, and right now in prison in Uganda, having been presented in a kangaroo military court. Many other citizens have been abducted either from Tanzania or from Kenya and other countries. That is how I ended up here. I'm not here to seek pity. I'm here to seek solidarity with Africans and citizens of the world, because I know that time immemorial, the liberation of oppressed places has been successful with the help of their diasporas. That's why I'm here. I could go on and on and on, but I hope that's introductory enough.
Alright, so let's stick with the theme of the military for now. And when people think of elections, you have to really put it in the context of Uganda. Describe what is referred to even by national media as the election in Uganda. When in fact when you're campaigning, there were certain places you could not have access because people want you to stream live. You were blocked by the military, you were blocked by the police. There were no-go zones declared for you, and your convoy was being fired on with live bullets, and some of your aides were actually struck with live bullets. And yet, people still showed up to the campaign rallies. Could you try to explain that? Why are people willing to take that risk to come to your campaign rallies, even though they know that there's a very high likelihood of violence being led out by the armed forces and the police?
Thank you. What keeps bringing the people to listen to the message of change is hope. It is only hope, the stubborn hope that drives the people. What keeps us going is the desire to keep that hope alive. We said it many times that Uganda is the second youngest country in the world. We are young, we are broke, we are hungry and angry. We could pick guns and remove that government, that oppressive regime. But we know history has shown us that violence has not produced peace, it produces more violence. And we also know that it's painful, but non-violence is stronger than violence. That's why we start to non-violence. So we went into this campaign like we did the other time, well knowing the kind of regime that we were facing, but it was the only window for us to connect with the people, to interact with the people, and to awaken and arouse them, and we achieved that. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the next questions is the role of outside countries. And the question is, how do international actors, whether it's governments, China, or multilateral institutions, and of course that includes the World Bank and IMF, how do they shape the political outcomes in Uganda? And how should African leaders navigate these influences while Well, in the case of Uganda, it's a bit different because he's maintained his sovereignty for the last 40 years now. So we can talk about that in Uganda's case, but generally in African countries as well.
Thank you very much. Sovereignty has a completely different meaning back home. Just like elections, just like democracy. I mean, these are words that are used and thrown around whenever desired by the authoritarian leaders back home. In the context of Uganda, much as we got independence 63 years ago, in 1962, I don't look at us as the citizens independent. The regime in Uganda for over a decade has been receiving up to $1 billion every year from the United States, let alone what comes from Europe and other countries. But this has been a transaction not between the people of Uganda and the development partners, but between General Museveni and the development partners. It's unfortunate, and this we've been reiterating it, that we are oppressed not because we are weak as the people of Uganda. Africans are oppressed by dictators not because they're weak, but because those dictators have a wind in their wing, and that wind are the so-called development partners. Allow me to call them oppression partners. Why? Because these are democracies, and if they wanted us to have democracy, we won't get it. I'll take you a little bit back. Idi Amin was supported by the British until they had had enough of him and others. The apartheid regime was supported by the West until they had had enough of him. I am very sure that if America or Europe did not agree with the oppression of the people of Uganda, they would stop it by disassociating with it. The regime in Uganda and many other authoritarian regimes in Africa have their bloodline, have their support, have their survival tied to the developed world. While elections are being rigged, all we get are statements and not action. On 18th and 19th November 2020, hundreds of people were massacred on the street in Uganda. Yes, we got some statements of condemnation, but we did not see any sanctions being slapped on those people that killed Ugandans in cold blood, and that continues again and again and again. So, yeah, the dictators are there, but they get their survival from the foreign partners. Today, Museveni is in business with China, and because of that, the biggest survival source, which is Lake Naroba, they call it Lake Victoria, is out of balance for the local fishing communities. Why? Because the Chinese are using it. The foreigners, for as long as they are white or have white skins in Uganda, are much more regarded than the citizens. It can go on and on and on and on. Much of the reason why we come to the developed world is to call them out. We know that apartheid thrived until a documentary was shown here in America against apartheid, and until there were widespread protests of Africans and friends of Africa condemned apartheid, that apartheid was defeated and brought down. So we come here not because people back home are not church. When we look at the campaign, the masses, young, old, male, female, educated, uneducated, rural, urban, all turned up to show their desire for change. But the dictator was able to subdue them by killing them, by abducting them, by raping women and men to cow them down. And yes, that succeeds because the Western world closes their eyes. That's why we come to spaces like this, well knowing that a student of Howard University might be a singular student, but you agree with me that you, especially who come from Africa, are so followed and so honored and so respected. To raise this voice, maybe this voice will be echoed by you and get our friends, the American population, and those in the other sector that you can resolve, to ensure that they are provoked, at least their conscience is provoked to change the narrative back home. Thank you.
All right, so I want to ask you a question about the youth movement and how you galvanize the youth in Uganda. Uganda is one of the youngest countries in the world, 80% of the population is under the age of 35. But before you respond to that question, and the importance of the youth movement in Africa, we've seen some changes in countries like Senegal because of what the youth have been able to do by coming out to the streets. So I want you to press that, but before that, I want to turn on to what you said in your last remark in terms of how the global community was galvanized to fight apartheid in South Africa. And I've always thought about this. Do you think it was much easier to get a global movement against apartheid than to try to galvanize a global movement to go after an African government which may actually have repressive policies that are comparable to the apartheid regime? Maybe speak on that and then say what to the youth.
Thank you. Why was it easier to get the global movement against apartheid up and running than now? I wouldn't be very quick to say it was easier because Mandela was in prison for 27 years. And even before then, there was oppression. In fact, I think it took longer. Why? Because the oppressors there, maybe because they were fighting. But again, I'll tell you that the challenge that I see is that back home we seem to be quick to condemn an oppression by foreigners and to close an eye to oppression by our own kin and kin. Oppression is wrong, whether by white people or by black people. Now, oppression during apartheid, during colonialism, brought us all together because we were oppressed as Africans in our own land. Unfortunately, majority of our liberators turned into oppressors. There's one song that I sang and said, 37 days, so much nasty things happened to her, but among which she told us that they even removed her contraception, the IUD, from.
Bibyo nozo biwudde bulungi bye bigambo President Kyagulanyi Ssentamu Robert Bobi Wine byayogedde wali ku Howard University mu ggwanga lya America, Washington DC, we bamuyise okubanga yogerako ne baprofesa okwogerako n'abantu ab'enjawulo ku nsonga ezigenda maaso mu Uganda, ku nsonga ezigenda maaso mu Africa, obwannakyemalira obukudde ejjembe mu nsi yonna, obwannakyemalira obuli wano obuli wali, tugenda kukola biki okubumalawo, tugenda kukola biki okweddiza ensi yaffe gijja mu mikono gy'abo abatemu, abatembuuzi, abatatwagaliza, abatatwagala, abeeyagaliza bo bokka. Ensi yaffe bagisangawo, baatusangawo, nga byonna bye tukola bya ggwanga lyaffe, bya nsi yaffe, kweyagaliza na kugyagaliza okulaba nga tugitwala mu maaso. Abasajja ab'ensi yaffe bagyonoonye, abasajja ab'ensi yaffe bagifudde famire yaabwe. Kati bali bateekateeka mbu n'omutabani naye ajja akwatemu, n'omutabani naye ekintu akikwate, n'omutabani aliyo yeepikaapika. Naye President Kyagulanyi akugambye nti gwe Munnayuganda nange ffe tulina okukola nga tutereeza eggwanga lyaffe, teri mulala agenda gitutereeza okuggyako ffe bannannyini nsi. Ffe tulina okukola omulimu ogw'enjawulo, ffe tulina okubaako kye tukola ekyenjawulo, ffe tulina okunyiiga, ffe tulina okumanya nti bwe tutatereeza ggwanga, ffe tulina okumanya nti bwe tutatereeza nsi yaffe.
I'll tell you that the challenge that I see is that back home we seem to be quick to condemn an oppression by foreigners and to close an eye to oppression by our own kin and kin. Oppression is wrong, whether by white people or by black people. Now, oppression during apartheid, during colonialism, brought us all together because we were oppressed as Africans in our own land. Unfortunately, majority of our liberators turned into oppressors. There is one song that I sang and said, see our leaders become misleaders and see our mentors become tormentors. And that's exactly what became. When you look back, most of the oppressors, most of the dictators were once freedom fighters. I was named after Robert Mugabe. My name is Robert. And my parents gave me that name because in 1982, Robert Mugabe was a prized revolutionary. And he had so much hope in him because he was speaking so highly, he was giving so much hope. Yoweri Museveni himself, the ruler of Uganda, he used to speak the way to speak, only more eloquent when he was much younger. And unfortunately, as time went on, power corrupted them. And again, even more unfortunately, they found justification for that oppression. That anybody, especially the young people, that rise to the occasion and say, we are the future and we want the opportunity to determine our own future. They are quick to black the agents of the West. That is an unfortunate bit, and that is why it has become so hard for us to fight, to free ourselves, to be able to determine our own destiny, because there is always that narrative of the past. You talked about the youth movement or the youth search, and we appreciate that, and it inspires us from South Africa to Zimbabwe to Uganda and now to Senegal. I was in Senegal when Sonko was in prison, when the then president was trying to change the constitution so he could run again and again and again. But it took the steadfastness and strength of the people of Senegal to resist that. And that is how the new generation rose to the occasion. I'm just glad that the new leadership, the young leadership of Senegal, was raised by the people, was mandated by the people, so they must be in many ways answerable to the people. Thank you.
So taking that same point, was me, a young Senegalese student actually posed that same question to me. And she said, why is it that in Uganda, in youth in Uganda are not able to duplicate what the young people were able to accomplish in Senegal? I think that's time to be tail end of the question that I posed. To what extent can youth-led political movements in Africa transition from protest mobilization to institutional political power?
Thank you. I'll say the young people in Uganda or anywhere in Africa are not just weak. They're doing all they're doing. They're doing all they can. Unfortunately, they are up against immeasurable force. I give an example of the youth movement in Tanzania. They tried just last year to fight for their democracy. Reports show us that up to 10,000 young people were massacred on the streets, and there has not been any accountability. In Uganda, the movement that I did, we have thousands, up to 3,000 of our comrades in prison for daring to raise their fist up and say they want freedom. You've seen that in many other countries, in Cameroon, even in Kenya where there was a Gen Z protest and all that. So the young people of Africa are rising to the occasion. It hurts me to say that I still strongly believe in nonviolence. Although nonviolence seems to be late. But these young people, we, those that are leading them, are struggling to discourage them from violence, because we see the kind of violence has brought to us. What was achieved in Senegal, I believe, can and will be achieved in Uganda, in Kenya, in Tanzania, and many other countries. But again, I believe one would be quick to ask, why did you come to America? We come to America because while we fight for freedom back in Uganda, and while we use the truth and words as our weapon, we cannot fight against $1 billion US. We cannot fight against American trained commandos that are staged as snipers to shoot down any young man or young woman that is seen on the street protesting with placards and banners and leading their friends. We cannot fight against the heroes that come from Europe. So, what we come to tell these administrations here, these Western capitals, is that we're not asking you to save us, just stop funding, stop sponsoring our operation, stop arming them, stop obstructing our moral fight for the values that you propose, for the values that you profess every day: democracy, the rule of law, and respect for human rights. I really struggle to speak from the point of view of an opposition leader, or even from the point of view of a politician. I hesitate to refer to myself as a politician. I did not get into politics because I wanted it. No. It was desperation. It was lack of an option. I'm not the most qualified.
Could you talk a little bit more about that for people that are not familiar? Why did you say, I have no choice but to join and engage in politics?
Well, thank you. I'm a musician, guys. You will not find a politician called Bobi when that's a musical name. In fact, a few years ago, I had my long dreadlocks that I painfully had to let go in order to fit in that image of the person running for president. But I never even used to dress like this. I'm a musician. I was a musician. That is good. But before then, as you know, stars are so sought after. And in a country like Uganda, the powerful and mighty love to associate with stars. So I was friends with all these military generals and all these powerful people. And it was alright. I was not affected by the operation because I was rich, I was popular, and everything. It's just this one day when I was walking out of a nightclub with my Cadillac Escalade with 24 spinning wheels, when I was attacked by a young man my age, but he was a security operative, and he slapped the hell out of me. What was my crime? Showing off. He asked me, why you're showing off? Don't you know this country has owners? Well, that was because all the girls were looking at me and that was the good of the night. That for me was a wake up slap. It reminded me that regardless of my stardom and my musical success and my wealth, I was not safe in a country where there's no justice. And since then, I started changing my music from entertainment to edutainment, a song about the rights of the people and the oppression. And it took me a whole 10 years, from when I was 25 until when I was 35. I realized that much as I was communicating, still nothing could change until I went to the platform where these words matter. And therefore, 10 years later, in 2017, I ran for MP. Because I wanted to go to Parliament and speak with words. So when I went to Parliament, in that election, good enough, people had connected with my thought line, and I won 80% of the vote, competing against the main political party and the opposition party. Still, I did not believe in partisan politics, and and we started a political movement called the People Power Movement. But as time went on, I was pushed to challenge General Museveni first to stay alive because I had come so outspoken that if I was not anywhere where the eye of the media would focus on me and I would be safe, then I would be in so much danger. I ran for president and here I am. But again, why do I say that I don't want to be representing a particular grouping, even when I lead a political party, the main opposition political party in Uganda? I know that Uganda, like many other countries, is now divided between oppressors and the oppressed, not between ruling party and opposition, no, between oppressors and the oppressed. Why am I saying that? Because there are oppressors, oppressed people, even within the ruling party. General Museveni's son, who is a military commander, had his birthday yesterday. It was the day before yesterday. And he issued an order that every soldier has to show up and run to celebrate his birthday. He issued an order that every government official must come and celebrate his birthday, even when he himself was not there. And he tweeted, when you check out his Twitter, he questioned why the former military commanders had disrespected him by not showing up for his birthday run. Now, everybody, majority of them, had to show up because they're so frightened. Imagine a military official in a government of Kim Jong-un. They are scared to death. So those are oppressed people within the ruling party. And yes, they are oppressed within the so-called opposition. Because we have so many members in the opposition whose major goal is not to put an end to the dictatorship, but to improve their status within the circumstances. So, what I see as desirable is galvanizing the people, regardless of their political party, to, see the truth and follow the truth. Now you ask, how did we then morph from a political movement called People Power to a political party called the National Unity Platform? Now we unveil this political party only 1 month to the election, because our movement could not be registered. There was an instruction by government not to register it as a political party, and yet I was going to run for president, and many people that we associate with were running for various positions of office. We came to an agreement that we cannot just be, sloganeering, and we cannot just be complaining. We chose to sit down and present an alternative. And so we ran for leadership. We got an unknown political party. There are so many political parties that were, registered so many years ago, and they remained on the papers. So we decided through a proxy that was crafted, but we have to do it. Through a proxy, we changed this name, and we had a hidden leaders conference where the leadership of that party elected me president, and boom, we showed it. The regime could not change anything. They had no alternative. The international community was watching. So they let us run. And that's how we ended up being a political party. Why then do I think that it is necessary for other people in the same circumstances to do the same? Because there must be an alternative. We must criticize what's being done wrong, but also we must offer alternatives. Because when we remove the dictatorships, there shouldn't be factions. There should be really alternatives to spring us to the next level.
Okay, final question. You ran for Parliament in 2017, as you recounted, and you defeated the ruling party candidate, I believe, by 2/3 or more of the vote. And then you were endorsed 2018, another parliamentary election in Arua, where Museveni himself went to campaign for the ruling party candidate, and you went to campaign for the opposition party candidate. And he panicked, I recall, and they accused you of inciting people to throw stones at his convoy, and the opposition candidate was arrested. You were arrested, beaten, and tortured, and the opposition candidate still won, even though Museveni had campaigned for his candidate. So I guess that was the decisive point that you started. Party. You came to the United States for treatment, and many people didn't believe you would go back to Ghana. But not only did you go back, you ran for president in 2021, and you ran again in 2026, even without the letters. Some people might wonder, why do you do that? Is the risk worth it? Explain.
Every risk for freedom is worth it. Because in this life, we either live or we exist. I want to live. And you cannot live when you're not free, when you don't have the right to stand your own destiny. So I went back home because I had to go back home anyway, whether I died or dead. You know, I went back home then because I needed to keep that hope alive. I had run for my life, but still, it wasn't a solution to stay out for some. You might ask me, are you going to go back this time? Yes, I am. I'm only trying to make sure that I make it harder, or at least more costly. Yeah.
So now we go to the best part.
On that note, I want to say for a long time, the dictator back home has been doing, has been thinking that he knows best. He's been doing his thing around with the interfering of into other countries' businesses. Take for instance, today, when you go to our neighboring countries around, everybody is complaining about Uganda. When you go to Southern Sudan, there are some places in Uganda you cannot cross at all, more especially now, in the counties where when you go to the Central African Republic, they don't want to hear about name called Uganda. When you go to Kenya right now, people, the Gen Zs in Kenya are complaining that the people that are abducting their children, they are not Kenyans, they are Ugandans. When you go to Tanzania recently, about the brutality they are complaining that the people who killed thousands and thousands of their people were not Tanzanians, they were mercenaries from Uganda. When you go to Ethiopia, they complain that Uganda is training Tigrins who cause who are they their audience? Let me say that. So now, when you move around, you find that Uganda is the common factor. Bodies are ignored into every other person's businesses. Mr. President, my question is, what plans you have in place to harness peace among all these countries that belong to the Great Lakes region? when you are sorry, because it won't be long before you are sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. I love to see Ugandans and Africans that have that stubborn faith, that have that hope. Indeed, we're going to be free, and that will not be so long from now. How are we going to stop the interfering in the business of other countries, killing them and messing them up? How are we going to deal? The question is, how are we going to deal with it? We're going to deal with it by stopping it. How are we going to stop it? By stopping the person that does that deal. That is Museveni. Get him out of power. You won't be able to use our military to kill people in South Sudan, or in Central African Republic, or to support and protect dictators in Equatorial Guinea and Cameroon. Because our military that is protecting the presidents of Equatorial Guinea, dictators that have been in power for over 40 years. So, when we stop a dictator in one place, we are stopping dictatorship in many other places. I'll tell you that Museveni's rule, or misrule for that matter, has not only affected Ugandans. We are 40 and maybe 50 million Ugandans. There are how many Kenyans? You know, a few millions. The millions in Tanzania are affected by the rule in Uganda. All the Great Lakes region, roughly about 200 million Africans are being affected by Museveni, directly and indirectly. So when we remove that dictator, yes, we Ugandans will be benefiting directly, but other Africans will be benefiting indirectly. So this is not only our fight. We are removing the dictator back home, but we are also stopping the interference, the massacres, and the perpetuation of dictatorships in other countries. Look at South Sudan. It's as if Museveni is the president also of South Sudan and these other countries. So let's remove him and stop that. Secondly, after Museveni is gone, we will be dealing with these countries. We won't be exporting war. We will be exporting business. These are going to be business partners. Look how it is with Congo. Look how it is with other countries. So, it is the peace. We won't be warmongers. No. We will be business partners with these countries. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, Mr. President. So whenever I come to your forums, a lot of people are asking to meet you directly. I have many questions. The first question, if you become the president, how would the African unity look like? If you can give us a picture of that. The second one, when are you speaking to write your life story, or if you want to write it, what the title will be?
Am I telling to write my story?
Yeah. I have, I think, coming to leadership at the age, empower and encourage a lot of people. But like, for example, in my country, South Sudan, there's people who are in leadership at your age, and we have that the uncle who will look at this guy who's speaking and telling him he's not elder than his age. So I wanted to know if you have a way of we can change the narrative and the scenario of young leaders for all the people. And also, youth want to get involved in leadership, but they are worried about how they can be stable. What is the best way for a young person to get into politics or to be a leader, but at the same time they can balance between their work and their career? Thank you.
Before I forget, these are 3 questions. The first question was, how do we hope to ensure that there's African unity? And the second question was,
your story.
my story. What name would the book be?
Yeah.
And the third was
About the youth.
about the youth and age. First, I about African unity. You see, you cannot find a solution unless you recognize what the problem is. What is the problem about African unity? We have the East African community. We have the African Union and all that. What are they doing? I think all these regional continental organizations are only a shadow of themselves. They have been reduced to clubs, president's clubs. While the East African community is there, it is a club of presidents, not for the East African people. Otherwise, these leaders would be concerned about the massacres in these countries. And these leaders would be calling each other to account, like it was back in the days. Unfortunately, now they are about these leaders and not the people. For as long as Museveni, Ruto, Suru, and others are on good terms with each other, it does not matter what kind of relationship I'm having with my Kenyan, Tanzanian, or South Sudanese brother and sister. And the same way, look at the African Union. Have you heard, for example,
this was the last question.
statement from the African Union
That's Barry.
about the xenophobic attacks
This is John, the president, on his live
of
TikTok.
black brothers and sisters in South Africa?
Kali, bye bigambo by'omukulembeze Kyagulanyi Ssentamu Robert Bobi Wine nga sinzidde wali ku Howard University mu Washington DC wasinkanya ba professor abakulembeze ab'enjawulo nga boogera ku nsonga za Uganda ne Africa. Atuggyeko tubannakyemalira tufunye tutya ensi ennungi egoberera ssemateeka, ensi ennungi erina democracy, ensi ennungi ew'ekitiibwa eddembe ly'obuntu, human rights. Tulina kubanga tulina abakulembeze abaagala abantu, abaagala ensi yaabwe, abakulembeze abalina obuntu, abalina okuswala muli mu mutima, abalina okuwa ekitiibwa obulamu bw'abalala. Tujja bano abakulembeze abatemu, bannakyemalira, abataagaliza, abayagaliza bokka nga tebaagaliza muntu mulala n'omukuba bulungi, nga bo bawulira bulungi, essanyu liba lingi nnyo mu mitima gyabwe, nga bo bali bulungi ne famire zaabwe naye ng'atabalala bali bubi. Ekyo kibasanyusa. Tulina okujja abakulembeze bannakyemalira.